The tablet was just sitting there on the kitchen counter. That's the part that still gets me. It wasn't hidden, it wasn't locked, it was just sitting there, charging, like any other evening. Sophia, my oldest. She came into the kitchen while I was reheating leftovers. She didn't say anything at first. She just picked up the tablet, walked over to me, and held it out. And I looked at her face before I looked at the screen. That was my first mistake. Because whatever I was about to see, I could already see it in her eyes. This 17-year-old girl who had spent weeks, I later found out weeks, trying to figure out how to hand her mother something that would break her. I took the tablet. I wish I could tell you I handled it with grace. I wish I could tell you I stayed calm, set it down, and dealt with it like a composed adult. I stood in my own kitchen, in my work clothes, holding a half-eaten plate of pasta, and read through 3 years of my husband Daniel's second life. Messages, photos, hotel check-ins, and then the part that made my legs actually stop working? 2 names, 2 little boys, his sons, children I had never known existed, born from a woman I had never heard of, during years when I was working double shifts to keep our household running while he was apparently building an entirely separate family on the side. Maya came in from the hallway. My 15-year-old. She had clearly been waiting to see what would happen when I found out. They had both known, for weeks. My daughters had been sitting across from their father at dinner, helping him pass the salt, watching him kiss me goodbye in the mornings, knowing, and saying nothing because they were terrified of what the truth would do to me. I put the tablet down on the counter. I told them both. I loved them. And then I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the floor for a long time. I filed for divorce the following week. There was no big confrontation, no screaming match. I just called a lawyer, sent Daniel a single text that said, "I know everything," and started pulling together every document in the house. He tried to talk to me. Several times. I let him talk. I didn't respond much. There wasn't anything he could say that would change the direction I was already moving in. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that his parents knew. Not just knew. They had known. For years. His mother Margaret had been covering for him, making excuses, running interference. She knew about the woman. She knew about the boys. And she had looked me in the face at Christmas dinners and birthday lunches and said absolutely nothing. That information came out slowly, in pieces. And each piece landed like something physical. But before I could even fully process any of it, Daniel died. Car accident. Sudden. Final. The divorce papers were sitting unsigned on a lawyer's desk somewhere when I got the phone call. And just like that, everything I had been building, every boundary I had been drawing, every step I had been carefully taking toward getting my daughters and myself out, all of it just stopped. And Margaret? Margaret decided that was her opening. 3 weeks after Daniel's funeral, Margaret sent 6 women from her church to surround my 15-year-old at a farmer's market. 6 grown women, around a child. On her birthday, she called me crying. Not the kind of crying where you can still make out the words between the sobs. The kind where all you hear is breathing and you already know before she says a single thing that something is very wrong. Maya. I had given her a small budget that morning and let her loose in the market on her own. It was her birthday treat. She loved that market. The fresh bread, the honey stalls, the woman who sold handmade chocolates wrapped in brown paper. It was supposed to be a good morning. A simple, good morning. I was 2 stalls away looking at tomatoes when my phone rang. I didn't even let her finish her sentence. I just ran. I heard them before I saw them. 6 women, all of them older. All of them standing in a tight half circle around my daughter like she was something that needed to be contained. Maya had her back against a wooden market stall, and she was holding her little paper bag of chocolates against her chest like it was the only solid thing she could hold on to. I remember that detail. The chocolate bag. Her birthday chocolates. Sophia was already beside me, and without a word I touched her arm and told her to take Maya's bags, pay whatever was left, and get to the car. She looked at me once. Then she took her sister's hand and they were gone. And then I turned around. I knew some of these women. Not well. But I had sat in the same church hall as a few of them during holidays, when Daniel's parents had dragged us along. I recognized the one in the yellow cardigan immediately. They didn't seem embarrassed that I had arrived. That was the part that genuinely shocked me. They weren't startled. They weren't apologetic. The woman in the yellow cardigan actually crossed her arms and told me that my daughters needed to spend time with their grandparents, that Maya needed to be a good big sister to her orphaned baby brothers. She said that to me. About my 15-year-old. On her birthday. I said things I will not repeat here. The volume got loud enough that a market supervisor eventually came over and asked all of us to leave. The women followed me to the car, still talking, still pushing. I got my daughters inside, locked the doors, and drove. Nobody spoke for about 10 minutes. Maya still had the chocolate bag in her lap. That night, after the girls went to bed, I got online and messaged Robert, someone I had stayed in contact with from that church, one of the few decent people connected to that world. I told him what happened. He went quiet for a moment. Then he told me to go look at the church's private Facebook group. I didn't have access, so he sent me screenshots. Margaret had written a post, a long one. The kind of post that takes time and intention to write. She talked about how heartbroken she was, how abandoned, how her son's wife and daughters had left her and her husband destitute and homeless. Which was a lie. They had inherited Daniel's personal accounts and his life insurance. She talked about how her grandsons were now living with distant relatives, and how I was responsible for that. And then I got to the part that made my stomach drop completely. She told the entire church community that the two boys were not from an affair. She told them I had used a surrogate because I was unable to have more children, and that when the surrogate died, I rejected the babies because they were boys. I read that line 4 times. I needed to make sure I was reading it correctly. She had sat down, typed those words out, and posted them to hundreds of people who believed her. And those same people had sent 6 of their own to surround my daughter at a market stall. That was when I stopped trying to keep my distance from all of this. That was the night I drove to the print shop. I spent 3 hours that night making the most beautiful binders you have ever seen in your life. High-gloss paper, personalized details, printed evidence. And I made sure every single one of them looked exactly like the little hymn booklets the congregation picks up at the door on Sunday morning. The woman at the print shop didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. I handed over the USB drive, told her I needed high-gloss paper, full-color, professional binding. She quoted me a price. I paid it without negotiating. She looked at the first page on her screen, looked back at me once, and then just started printing. I sat in the plastic chair by the window and waited. I want to be clear about something. I didn't make those binders in anger. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was the calmest I had been in months, actually. Maybe the calmest I had been since Sophia handed me that tablet in the kitchen. There is something very settling about finally deciding to stop absorbing everything quietly. I had the affair photos. The text messages between Daniel and the woman. The messages between Daniel and his parents where they discussed covering everything up. Margaret's messages to me after Daniel died. The ones where she told me I was destroying the family. And the ones she sent directly to my daughters. The ones where she called Sophia and Maya bastards. 2 days after their father's funeral. I printed all of it. And then I sat at my kitchen table that night and put it together the way you'd put together a church hymn booklet. Same size. Same weight of paper. Neat little binding. When you picked it up, it felt familiar in your hands. The kind of thing you'd flip open without thinking. The first page when you opened it was Daniel and the woman. In my living room. His face completely clear. Her face completely clear. Underneath, I had written both their names. Just their names. Nothing else. I didn't need to write anything else. Sunday morning, I got up early. I dressed like I was going somewhere unremarkable. I drove to the church. I walked in through the side entrance, the one that leads directly to the back table where the real hymn booklets sit in a neat stack for whoever needs one. I placed mine in the stack. I walked back out. The whole thing took less than 4 minutes. I drove home, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. By early afternoon, Robert was sending me screenshots faster than I could open them. The Facebook group was moving so fast, the comments were overtaking each other. People were using words I hadn't heard since my grandmother's generation. The pastor himself had to step in just to keep the language from completely derailing. But here is the thing that I did not expect. They were angry at Daniel. They were angry at Margaret for the cover-up. They were angry about the messages to my daughters. But a portion of them, a stubborn, telling portion, were still angry at me for the divorce. One commenter wrote that my actions were understandable, given the shock, but that I had still failed in my duties. I read that and laughed for the first time in weeks. Margaret made a post that same evening, not in the group, on her personal page. It was 3 paragraphs long, and it started with the words, "I feel so alone. I feel so alone." That's how she started it. 3 paragraphs about how the elderly are forgotten, how loyalty means nothing anymore, how she wished her son was still alive because he would have taken care of her. With what money, I thought. I was the one who kept that household running for 18 years. Daniel couldn't have taken care of a houseplant without a reminder. But I read every word. And then I put my phone down and went to check on my daughters. Sophia was in her room doing homework. Maya was on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin watching something on her laptop. Normal. Quiet. The kind of evening that used to feel ordinary and now felt like something I had to consciously protect. I sat next to Maya for a while without saying anything. She leaned her head on my shoulder. That was it. That was the whole moment. But I felt it in my chest in a way I still can't fully describe. These were the girls that Margaret had called bastards. 2 days after burying their father. These were the girls that 6 grown women had decided to corner at a market stall. And here they were, doing homework, watching shows, leaning on their mother, just trying to move forward. I wasn't going to stop until every single person in that woman's world knew exactly who she was. The letters came 4 days later. 2 of them, both handwritten, both addressed to Sophia and Maya separately, not to me, directly to my daughters, which told me whoever wrote them had actually thought about it. They were apology letters from 2 of the women at the market. I read them before I gave them to the girls. I don't apologize for that. They were genuine, detailed. One of them mentioned specifically that she had not known the full situation and that she was ashamed of how she had spoken to Maya. The other one was shorter, but included a small gift card. Nothing extravagant, just something thoughtful. I gave both letters to the girls that evening. Sophia read hers, folded it carefully, and put it in her drawer without a word. Maya read hers twice. Then she looked up at me and said, "Does this mean it's over?" I didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer was no, not yet. We were still in the middle of a custody battle. Margaret and her husband had filed to get visitation rights over Sophia and Maya. Girls who were 17 and 15, girls who had therapists, girls who had made their feelings about their grandparents extremely clear. The courts don't move fast. And Margaret wasn't done moving pieces. 2 days after the letters arrived, I got a call from my lawyer. Margaret had submitted a character statement to the court. In it, she described me as unstable, vindictive, and deliberately alienating her grandchildren from their family. She filed it the same week she was posting about feeling alone and abandoned on Facebook. The same week. My lawyer asked me if I had any documentation that might contradict her statement. I told her I had a binder. She went quiet for a second. Then she said, "How detailed?" I told her to clear her afternoon. My lawyer's name is Patricia. She's been practicing family law for 23 years, and I have genuinely never seen her react to anything. She is the kind of woman who reads devastating depositions with the same expression she uses to order lunch. She opened the binder. She went through the first 4 pages without a word. Then she stopped on the messages Margaret had sent to my daughters, the ones from 2 days after Daniel's funeral. She read them slowly, turned the page, read the next ones, set the binder down on her desk, and looked at me over her glasses. She said, "Where has this been?" Not a question, just 4 words sitting in the air between us. I told her I had been trying to keep things quiet, trying to handle it without making everything worse. She nodded slowly in the way that people do when they are being polite about the fact that you made a mistake. Then she picked the binder back up and kept reading. The custody hearing was 3 weeks later. Margaret and her husband were asking for formal visitation rights over Sophia and Maya. Their argument was that I had deliberately alienated my daughters from their paternal grandparents, and that the girls deserved a relationship with the only living connection they had left to their father. That sounds reasonable on paper. It stops sounding reasonable when the judge reads a message calling those same girls bastards 2 days after they buried their father. Patricia submitted everything. The messages, the Facebook post with the surrogate fabrication, the original affair documentation, the harassment messages Margaret had sent me during the divorce, all of it organized, dated, and presented in a format that left absolutely no room for interpretation. Margaret's lawyer tried to argue that the messages were taken out of context. The judge asked, "What context would make calling your grieving teenage granddaughters bastards acceptable?" There was no answer to that. The court denied Margaret and her husband's petition for visitation entirely. Not supervised visitation, not limited contact. Denied. The judge noted specifically that the documented pattern of behavior toward the minor children made any form of forced contact contrary to their well-being. Sophia and Maya would have full autonomy over whether they ever chose to have a relationship with their paternal grandparents. They chose no. Both of them. Clearly and without hesitation when asked. The drive home afterward was quiet. Sophia was in the passenger seat. Maya was in the back. We stopped at a traffic light, and Maya asked if we could get food on the way home, and Sophia immediately had an opinion about where, and they started arguing about it the way they always do, and I just sat there at that red light listening to them argue about whether they wanted burgers or noodles. And I started crying. Not sad crying. Not relief exactly either. Just the kind of crying that happens when your body finally releases something it has been holding for so long it forgot it was even holding it. Sophia noticed first. She stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. She didn't say anything. She just reached over and put her hand over mine on the steering wheel. The light turned green. I drove. Margaret still posts sometimes about loneliness, about being forgotten, about how the world has changed and nobody respects family anymore. I don't respond. I don't need to. Sophia got into her first choice university program this year. Maya has started baking. The kitchen smells like butter and vanilla on weekends now. We are not fully healed. I won't pretend that. But we are okay. And after everything that tried to break us. That is more than enough. And I know some of you are sitting there thinking, "Claire, you went too far. You could have handled it quietly. You could have let the courts do their job and left the church completely out of it." Maybe. But here is what I know. The moment I stayed quiet, they sent 6 women to corner my 15-year-old daughter at a market stall. On her birthday. While she was holding a paper bag of birthday chocolates. My silence didn't protect my daughters. My evidence did. Malcolm X said, "A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything." I am a woman. And I decided I was done falling. So I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Was I right to expose everything the way I did? Or do you think there was a quieter road that still leads to the same place? Because I genuinely want to know what you think. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe. Every week, there is a new story on this channel, a new woman who refused to stay broken. and this channel only grows when you help it grow.